So we have a wonderful group of panelists here for today's discussion, and Elliot and I will be in the driving seat, but I feel like this might end up being a self-driving car, which is wonderful. And I'm going to stop that analogy there because I don't know where else to take it. We have the chat function. I'll be monitoring that as well. If you have any questions, please pop them in the chat or hold them until the end. Please be considerate and respectful and sensitive with your questions as well, because this may be a sensitive topic for some people. I'm sure you all will be, but I'm going to do the rigmarole anyway. And depending on how we go with the discussion, I will leave a few minutes at the end of the session for some questions, and we'll turn the recording off for the Q&A as well. So thank you to those that are joining us live. Thank you to our speakers, and thank you to the people that are listening in whatever time and place and space they are doing so later on. Elliot, are you happy for me to hand to you?
I am. Hello, everyone. The thing I wanted to say at the beginning is that we do have a rough structure planned in that we have a series of questions that we're going to informally go through and see if the panelists have experiences that relate to those and they'd like to answer them. So just in case it feels like a sort of free-for-all with absolutely no direction at all, there is a direction, but I'm not going to be making sure we stick firmly to it because I want to sort of guide it by the experiences that people are talking about. The reason I'm really saying this is partly so you can have a picture in your head of it, and partly so that you understand that if like there are tons and tons of questions, there might be situations where we keep going because it's going to come up as a question soon or something like that. So I think the first thing to do would just be for people to introduce themselves. So before we do that, just to make sure that everyone's in the right place. Hello, we're here to talk about the intersection of being neurodivergent and identifying as LGBTQIA+. So I'll introduce myself first. Hello, I think a lot of you here are probably aware of me. My name is Elliot, and my job is working at the University of Glasgow to help people make their teaching more inclusive. But personally, I am autistic, ADHD, trans, asexual, and formerly identified as lesbian, and now identify as confused because now I'm see myself as a dude. That means I'm straight. It's a lot to deal with. So that's me. My pronouns are he, him. If anyone gets my pronouns wrong, that's okay. Don't worry. So Chiara, did you want to introduce yourself too?
Yes, I was preoccupied with my cherry Pepsi there.
Sorry, that was very bad timing on my part.
My name is Dr. Chiara Holland. I have ADHD. I'm a neurodiversity researcher at the University of Glasgow as well, and I am bi. That's it.
Because I imagine that we might be in a group of people that would prefer me to call on them potentially rather than figuring out whose turn it is next, I'm going to go ahead and do that. Katie, I'm just going to do the order that I can see you on my pictures. So Katie, I'm going to go for you first. Hello.
Hiya, I'm Katie MUNDAY. I use they, them pronouns. I am still figuring out gender, I think, but I'm kind of trans, masc, non-binary, the list goes on, and bisexual, and ADHD, obsessive compulsive, autistic, otherwise disabled as well. And yes, I'm doing a master's in research at University of Portsmouth on trans and or non-binary autistic experiences and what recommendations we can make for future research on our kind of experiences.
Excellent. I should add my OCD and other miscellaneous disabilities to mine as well. Thank you very much. Alex.
Hi, I'm Alex. I use he, him pronouns. I'm trans, I'm aroace, and I have ADHD. I'm doing a master's of research in biosciences. And if my Wi-Fi goes, it's because the Wi-Fi at work is not great. So I apologize for that then.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Rebecca.
Hi. Oh, is it really echoing?
No, you're fine. You're good.
Okay, so it's echoing for me, but like, if it's not for you, that's all right. I'm Rebecca. I'm a second year PhD student at the University of Oxford, where I sort of study earthquake physics kind of stuff. I use they, them, and she, her pronouns. I just go with generally queer as a label. I'm dyslexic, dyspraxic, maybe ADHD. We're working on that.
Thank you very much. I feel I should have asked this in advance because now I am going to be socially awkward and say, is it Jay or Jai? I don't know how to pronounce it. I'm sorry.
Jay, you're fine.
Jay. I was just like, but if it was Kai, it would be Kai. But then, anyway, hello.
Hello.
Jay.
So yeah, my name's Jay. My pronouns are they, them. So I'm trans, non-binary, autistic, ADHD, and OCD. I'm a translator and PhD student. I currently live in Granada in southern Spain. Not as sunny as you would think. Torrential rain and potentially earthquaking going on. So that's cool. And I'm a PhD student at the University of Birmingham. I research science and speculative fictions from Brazil and the Dominican Republic, and their intersections with queerness and blackness. And I also work very closely with the LGBTQIA+ and neurodivergent communities as an inclusive yoga teacher in a queer and neurodivergent space. So classic neurodivergent, taking on everything, trying to sort of like, win the world. But yeah, so that's me, here, there, and everywhere.
Sounds identifiable. Your mic is coming in and out a little bit, so just in case you think that somebody isn't paying attention to you or has ignored you, it might be that sometimes we can't hear every word. So just
okay.
Most of it was great. So just to be aware. Thank you very much. Artie.
Hi, I'm coming to you from my bed because I'm in the middle of a chronic illness flare.
Yay.
I'm Artie, they, them pronouns, generally queer, non-binary, but to be specific, agender. We've got a long list of neurodivergencies, but let's go with ADHD, autistic, BPD, dyslexic, and probably some others going on. I'm a writer and a sayer of obnoxious, annoying things to most neurotypical people. And yeah, generally creative, but also would love to study more things and be more involved with things. But as I said, chronic illness, bed.
Yes, I can identify a lot with that. Chronic illness is what it is, isn't it? Thank you. Eleonora, did I pronounce that one right?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, I'm
okay.
Because
tell me how to do it properly.
Italian are weird, so.
So Eleonora?
Yeah, more like that.
Okay, sorry. Please feel free to correct me. Go for it.
I usually go by Ellie when I'm outside of Italy because it just feels easier for other people. Anyways, I use she, her pronouns. I think I'm cis, though I'm not perfectly sure about it now. And I'm bi and poly, and well, I'm formally diagnosed as autistic, but I probably am ADHD as well. So I'm looking into that now. I'm a PhD candidate in psychology and cognitive science in Genoa, Italy. I mainly study experimental pragmatics in autism and neurotypicality or whatever. Of course, that is not even mentioned because, pragmatics is pragmatics, and then there's pragmatics in autism. So I basically ended up being diagnosed because of this. So I'm newly diagnosed. I've been diagnosed last year. And that's pretty much everything.
Excellent. Congratulations. And I am even more awkward because I actually speak Italian a bit. So if I need to work on my skills. That's all brilliant. Thank you so much, all of you, for sharing all of that. It's really exciting to have all of these people together in one virtual place. So we'll get started discussing some of the prompts that we've got. So the first one is, do you find it useful or relevant to have particular language around being neurodivergent and being LGBTQIA? So I don't know if everyone listening will be familiar with this. Hopefully one of our panelists would also do me a favor of explaining what it means to you. But some examples would be ARTIE-queer or neuroqueer or ARTIE-gender. I did not see which of you two had your hands up first, Alex and Jay. I don't suppose either of you remember which one of you it was. Okay, Alex, I'll go for you first.
Yeah, sure. I raised my hand second, but that's fine.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
I think it's fine. It's fine. I think having the specific language depends a lot on the setting for me. So when I'm talking to other neurodivergent people or other queer people, having the specific languages to say like niche things can be quite useful. Like I said, I introduced myself as trans. My actual gender identity is like goes beyond that. But I would never go into that with someone who's also not queer, because I feel like you wouldn't get it. So having the more specific labels and the more specific language, I tend to find useful when speaking to people that I think would understand. But when it comes to just the standard neurotypical cishet person, like, yeah, no, I can't be bothered. And that's when just broader words are more useful, I think.
That makes sense. Yeah, I think mine is more complicated as well. But again, it's how useful it would be to go into it and whether that would help communication or etc. Yes, I can definitely understand that. Jay.
I'm hoping my mic's a little bit better now. It's not going to come in and out. Perfect. Yeah, I think, these terms are both useful and relevant. Obviously, they're kind of born of the queering of both euronormativity and heteronormativity sort of simultaneously. And yeah, I think it really sort of grounds the relationship between queer and neurodivergent identities. So it's really about being sort of both neurodivergent and queer and the points at which these interact. And for me, I sort of think like I can't be neurodivergent without my queerness, and I can't be queer without my neurodivergent identity. So it's kind of they interact on all levels. And I think sort of being part of both collectives in a way, sort of in their many guises, can actually be quite an isolating experience. Predominantly due to the ways that society marginalizes people of these experiences. So often having a term or specific language around these identities, in particular, sort of their relationship to each other and how they interact, is very important. In many ways, I think it's almost validating. There's a lot of discourse, as we know, around sort of queer identities and neurodivergent identities, and sort of like, oh no, you can't be queer, you're just autistic, so you're confused. And all of these discourses around confusion, and both professionals and not so professionals. And I think like there's a lot of that sort of discourse around confusion that's born of being neurodivergent. So having a specific term to say I'm ARTIE-queer or neuroqueer or gender, whatever, sort of really builds a case for these intersectional identities, and I find that personally very validating, especially if you're in a position where your identities are being questioned. So for me, they're definitely of some use.
It's funny because what you've said there, like, is why I find this kind of language in relation to any of these things helpful at all, is because to me it feels validating. Having a word to be able to describe it makes me feel like I'm almost more allowed to feel it, which I'm aware is something I probably need to work through with my therapist. But yeah, I find that really helpful too. Katie, you've put your hand up. Hello.
Yeah, I think it's helpful, just kind of piggybacking on what Jay was saying. I think it's helpful to have words that are specific to our experience of things, when it's difficult to see yourself in other people or in different social interactions and stuff. So to have our own specific language is really, really helpful, and like you say, really, really validating as well. And I think for me personally, I knew I was queer before I knew I was autistic. So and now when I look back, because I got formally diagnosed as autistic when I was 29, so when I look back at things, it makes more sense of my queerness. So I think it's a nice thing to have, and to have that, you know, if someone says they're gender vague, like I understand what that means. Or like, you know, there's folk gender and cloud gender, and like, yeah, I really like the idea of kind of neurogender and how you know, it's about embodiment of gender and gender expression and all of that as well. So yeah, a huge fan of neuroqueer, absolutely huge fan of neuroqueer. I couldn't be any more of a huge fan of Nick Walker and Remy Yergel, and is it Athena Lynn Michaels Dillon, who came up with a kind of terminology with that. So yeah, like, big up Nick Walker.
Nice one, thank you. Artie.
Yeah, it's kind of things that came up when other people were speaking, but also like the first time this question was ever really actually asked to me was actually by Katie. And that was sort of when I first was thinking, oh, well, yeah, there are these other terms that specifically encompass that particular relationship to either your queerness or gender or both, with being neurodivergent. And then some things that you were saying, Elliot, as well, about the finding those words that help you go, oh, okay, that's like a thing, and that's a thing I've been experiencing, but not really been able to go, yes, that there is what I experience and live. And I feel like personally, while I don't really use these terms for myself, there's a lot of the layers that everyone's been talking about that I can really relate to and agree with. Like I who was the first person who spoke? Was it Alex? Mentioned about depending on who you're with and around, and that's basically why as well I use non-binary generally, but in spaces like this, like I did today, was introducing, oh, more specifically agender, because it's more of like a space that is more free and able to digest and respect the I can't think what the right word is, nuances of things like that. And I feel like I've edited a lot of other neurodivergent transgender people's work that has talked about other kinds of experiences with gender too, and like, if anything, that's kind of been the most eye-opening aspect of that for me, is being able to read these other people's experiences to but also like try and help make it as legible and understandable as possible to like a broader audience. Because I, again, sick, don't really get much ability to personally interact with a lot of people in that kind of space of neurodivergence, disability, gender, queerness, and all those things put together. But I do also feel like particular terms like neuroqueer and autigender and things like that, I can see myself finding those terms particularly useful in writing to kind of specifically talk about that as an experience. And I feel like that's probably quite common as well among like academics generally. I am not particularly an academic, but I feel like having those words to be like, hey, here's this big thing in one quick little tidbit, and if you want to go work out some more, then here is the word to help you go that way. It's like that's how I've kind of come across all different aspects of my identity, is that, oh, a word's come up, that's interesting, what does that mean? And then you kind of fall down this hole and find these different aspects of each different kind of thing and experience until you go, like I'm also specifically doing that recently with asexuality, which is very confusing, but I just feel like I just do it over and over again. I'm sure everybody else has that sort of like, oh, okay, so now here's the period of time where I'm trying to work this thing out, and then you go, oh, and they are all one thing. They are all just like some blurry mess where you can't quite work out where anything ends or begins.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's good because this is a good sort of bridge to the next question as well. Like, it's also important because generally society expects that people will experience things in a way that is generally not the way that we do experience things. And it's very difficult to be able to see that clearly in yourself when there's often a message from society, oh, well, if you just tried a bit harder, you'd be able to be neurotypical or straight or cis or, you know, allosexual or monogamous or whatever. And it's sort of like, okay, but it's not really about trying. And the way I am as it is actually what I like. And there's something about exploring different things. Like for me, asexuality was a big one for that, of being like, oh my God, I'm not just this broken person because I don't experience life this way. Actually, this is a totally valid way to be. So it's, so to take that forwards, the next question, sorry, I'm just making sure I've got so many things open in life, in my brain, on this computer. Did you experience any similarities or differences between realizing that you were neurodivergent and realizing that you were queer, LGBTQIA+, whichever term you identify from within that? And I think maybe we can combine this a little bit with the next question, which is, and also the coming out process. Like, did you see similarities and differences in the realizing for yourself and in the sharing that with other people? So Alex, off you go. Or you do a degree in it. That's the thing Casey's put there. Yeah. Alex, off you go.
Yeah. With realizing both with being queer and being neurodivergent, there's that moment of, oh, things make sense. Oh, that explains a lot. And it's like so many things fall into place. And it's like, that's why that happened. And that's okay. And it's comforting a lot figuring this out. Like, I got diagnosed with ADHD on accident, and I did not know what that meant. And it took another year or so for me to actually find out what it meant. And when that was coming in, I was like, oh wait, this is an ADHD thing. Oh, I'm not just lazy. I'm not just incompetent. It's not that I'm incapable of doing things. And once I understood that and started letting myself, function to how I should be functioning, and I started being like, oh, I can actually do things. And it's the sense of, oh, okay, I can just be myself and work around these things that other people might not be struggling with. And with like realizing that I was trans, was like, oh, that was a lot of, right, okay, this also makes a lot of sense. And being able to address these things and be more comfortable and be myself. And it's a lot of accepting and then just being able to be yourself without just beating yourself down for it a lot. Realizing I was ace was also a big moment of like, it's just a lot of that. In terms of coming out, I see a big difference in the two in terms of work. I feel the need to come out with being neurodivergent, like coming into the labs and things. I had to tell my supervisor about it so that I could put in place my accommodations, so that I could have more accessibility in the labs and in the workspace. Don't feel as much of a need to come out as queer, even though it is blatantly obvious. I don't feel the need to come and say it. So that's a big difference. Like professionally, I feel much more of a need to come out as neurodivergent. To just like my friends and people around me, I will say at one point or another, yeah, I'm queer, yeah, I'm disabled in this way, just because I want to not be friends with someone who would have a problem with that. So it's let's say this, because if you have a problem with this, I don't want to be around you. So let's just put this out there so I can weed out the people who I just don't want to interact with.
Oh, yes. So relatable.
Yeah. Professionally, that's not the case. It's not a don't want to be around you because you have an issue with this. It's like, no, I need you to understand that I will not be looking you in the eye at all, ever. And I feel very fortunate right now because my supervisor is very, very nice and very accommodating with all these things. And I actually can just go to the lab and do things, and I have things written down, and she's a saint, and it's been working out really well. And I know this could have gone miserably otherwise, and it would have gone really bad if I didn't go and be like, no, I need you to do things differently for me. So it's more important professionally to do that for me personally.
Yeah, and I think the thing you talk about in relation to like who you want to be around and things like that can sometimes be misinterpreted by other communities that maybe don't understand the experience of being neurodivergent, queer, whatever. And it's more like, I want to be around people that I can be safe around, that won't tell me I shouldn't be me. That's really what it is, right?
I realized I was AROS much after I realized, like, I thought I was pan before, and it was much after I realized I was trans things. And when I did figure out I was AROS, I lost friends because they were very aphobic. And I have a partner, we are in a queer platonic relationship, and these two friends who were mutual friends, both of us, were like, nah, you're gonna shag. You're absolutely, one day you're gonna shag. And it was like, no, we don't want to do that. I'm open to having sex. I don't want to have sex with my partner. My partner is not open to having sex at all. This is not something that's going to happen. And that wasn't something they could deal with. And like, they kept making comments and things. And it's like, I don't want to go through this again of having people who don't respect my identities. So it's like, we're mentioning these things. If you have an issue, we're just moving on. Bye. And then, because it's a matter of like, I want to be respected by people who I'm friends with. So
it's funny how like there are things like being aromantic or asexual, which is what aro and ace mean for anyone listening that isn't familiar with those terms. Like, it's strange that people that identify as other parts of the umbrella sometimes find it quite difficult to understand that it's like the idea from society that the most important relationships in your life should be sexual, or that a romantic partner should be sexual, or that a valuable relationship should be romantic, all of these things, and otherwise it's just dreadful. It's one of those ones that still sticks around a lot. Other hands are up, so I'm going to go, I think it was Jay next.
Yeah, so for me, when I found out that I was autistic, I think like everyone, it was a sort of very whirlwind of emotions, from joy to relief to confusion to some sort of weird sense of grief, and then sort of trundling along to acceptance. And personally, I feel like I'd finally found myself, and then I realized that I'd have to actually tell people that, you know, if I was going to be able to live as me and the person that I am and not have to mask everything, then yeah, I'd have to tell sort of the other humans in my life, which sort of just sparked this horrible sense of fear, I guess, and dread. I think predominantly due to like the misinformation and stereotypes that people have surrounding autism, and I was very much sort of in that bubble of always had good grades at school, never had any particular issues in terms of academics, which is sort of, you get put in that little group of, oh, you don't need any help then, so we'll just ignore you, next kind of thing. So there was nothing that was ever super obvious in terms of academics, and that's for me always been what's caused, I guess, the fact that my diagnosis, I didn't get it until I was 26, and it was, yeah, it's all due to sort of fitting into that box. So there was never any like suspicions or questioning around anything. I was just the weird one, but I had good grades, so it was fine, no issues. I think a lot of people were, yeah, there's a lot of people nodding. So yeah, I was sort of very panicky around how I was going to explain this, how I was going to justify, I guess. I felt like I need to justify certain behaviors or certain things that I did or ways that I did things, which obviously I shouldn't have to, and I know that I don't, but that was like where my main sense of fear came from. And in terms of my queerness, I think like I've always been openly queer, like even if I lacked the vocabulary and the words to express that, I think I was very clear about it when I was about 5 or 6 years old, and sort of everyone just realized that, okay, like this is you, that's fine. And I think as an adult now, I sort of gone through a lot of relationships that have ended up being incredibly toxic. And now at 28, I'm kind of only just finding real friendships. And surprise, surprise, they're all queer and neurodivergent, lovely human beings. So it's just taken me a very long time to get there. But I think I tend to come out as both queer and neurodivergent together without realizing it. It just sort of happens. It's like a bundle, sort of like this is me. So I'd never really properly gone through like a coming out of both things separately. It's just more I'm Jay and my pronouns are they them, I'm trans non-binary, autistic, ADHD, OCD, hey, like love me or leave me sort of thing, which I'm like super like proud of myself for having got to that moment. But it has like come after sort of many years of just fear and like having gone through really challenging relationships and things. But yeah, it's definitely a sort of 2-in-1 kind of thing for me.
Nice. Yeah, that makes sense. I think it was Eleonora next. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, probably. I know we're gonna go through the invisibility thing next, but it's, I mean, my experience of both realizing these things and coming out as these things is rooted in invisibility, because like as a bi person and an autistic person who doesn't really look very autistic, realizing it took a lot of time, because you know this, I could fit into the standard. I could fit badly, of course. I mean, I felt badly, but what other people could see was good enough not to question my neurotypicality or like my heterosexuality and even my monogamy, because like I felt actually that monogamy was the toughest one to break, especially as a woman. And when it comes to coming out, I felt pretty invalidated with all of them except for monogamy, because monogamy was, I mean, people reacted so badly that they wouldn't just say it isn't real, because it was, I mean, it was blatantly obvious. Whilst, you know, if you're bi but dating a man, or, you know, you're autistic but you're being perfect at school and work and everything, and you just fit into neurotypical standards of labor, then people can question the fact that you are. Also in Italy, self-identification is not really a thing. Like most people really want you to have the diagnosis saying that you are. So until I was diagnosed...
I need to get my doorbell, but you keep talking and people will listen.
Sure. So until I got my formal official diagnosis, most people thought that since I was studying these things, I was being, I don't know, somehow dragged to it, because I've read so much about it that I felt, I mean, I identified it in the object of my studies, which is absolute nonsense to me, because since I'm studying psychology and cognitive science, you guys can imagine what kind of stuff I was reading. Like I could not identify in that, like not, because the whole thing was about deficits and, you know, the medical model, because cognitive science is rooted in the medical model. So in fact, when I talk science, I keep saying autistic people, and I don't really put myself into that. Like I usually say they process things this way. I just cannot, you know, kind of merge the science me and the autistic me, because the way I'm studying science about autism is a completely different thing from what I experience as an autistic person. So this is how wrong it is to assume that I identified as autistic because I was studying autism. That actually probably delayed my diagnosis, because, you know, I didn't feel that broken the way the science made it to feel. And when it comes to coming out, I had to come out as autistic because I'm studying these things. And obviously, you know, if you study pragmatics in autism from the point of view of a neurotypical person, or from the point of view of an autistic person, that makes kind of a lot of difference. Although it's laughable because I didn't know before last year. And I think there's a lot of people who do not know. But even then, I found a lot of people, even professors studying it, denying that I could be autistic because, you know, woman, you speak well and you look me in the eyes, which is absolutely not true. I usually look at this like in the middle of the eyes. Yeah, it just felt like coming out was mainly invalidating in my experience for all of these identities that I embody. And the main thing about all of these coming outs was rage, basically, because even in the moment where you actually open yourself up and just explain your identity to people, it's the moment they explain it back to you and reject what you've discovered about yourself, and that makes it even harder to communicate, when it should be, you know, the moment you understand the way you can communicate better, right? So yeah.
Yeah, that was, wow, that was really powerful about the response of people explaining back to you why you're not whatever. I think that's something I can relate to in a lot of ways. It's a really, really good way of putting it. And I think such a common experience. It's just absolutely devastating. Okay, Rebecca.
So I think for me, I found out I was like officially neurodivergent when I was like 14. And like, because of some technical errors, it was supposed to happen when I was 11, they lost the forms, which you can't make it up. But I think that suddenly it felt like somebody like told me this, and suddenly like everything sort of explained itself with my work. And then like, so I didn't ever really feel like, I was sort of relieved, and then I just stayed as relieved / now understanding. Whereas I think that with being queer, it's like, it's much more self-driven. It's all about like how you feel and not how you do things. And so I found it a lot harder to like grapple with like exactly what that means for me, and sort of like I can't say that word, but like moving around the like different points and identities, being like, well, is this it? Whereas with neurodivergency, it feels a bit more like you do things this way, and like people can see you do things this way. And so it's a lot more external. And then sort of then going on then to coming out. Part of it is I'm a student in a university. And so there's people whose almost job it is to do it for me. And so they do a very bad job of it. But there is an official form that says these things that I can be like, you can look at this form, look, it says on all your systems. Whereas coming out as queer is very much more like, I have to do it. And I have to do it, I feel like I have to do it more socially. Whereas most people I meet in the department don't need to know that I'm neurodivergent, because I'm just like chatting to them at coffee. Whereas I feel that like being queer is more of a social thing for me. And so it was not, you get what I mean? Like, it's more relevant in social situations. And so like the people I have to come out to are very different. And I feel a lot more pressure on like having to judge the situation. Whereas a lot of particularly our undergraduates are probably neurodivergent. And so lecturers, I feel more are familiar with that as a concept. Maybe that's particularly because I'm in a physical science. I'm not in social sciences, where these are things that people think about all the time. But then,
sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. Like the next bit of the question on the like notes was about like, do you feel there's representation / are you that representation? And so the other thing I was thinking about is like, that's all about like coming out to people who are more senior than you or on your level, but I also teach undergraduates. And so I think in that I feel much more compelled to be the representation. And like in my introductory email, I'm like, this is me, and like, here's a whole list of things that I wouldn't do to people older than me, because I really wanted someone to do that when I was a student. But yeah,
that makes sense.
Can I add something to that?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, I also do that with the kids that I work with. So I run social groups with disabled kids and coach wheelchair basketball as well. And like, yeah, just being like, yeah, I'm autistic too, or I do this as well, and like not shielding or masking or whatever my behaviors when I'm around them. Not necessarily with the queer thing so much, but like with being autistic and stuff. And then I found that quite a lot of our parents have been really like responsive to that as well when I came out as autistic at work. And they were just like, oh, it's really nice that my children can see that, you know, you can go on and do stuff, and you know, it's not just you know, the hellscape that is school for quite a lot of us. Like, there are things that you can go on and you can enjoy life and get married if you want to and do these other things, because my husband works where I work as well. So yeah, I think it's interesting what you said, Rebecca, about choosing who you come out to. And like, I think that's also to do with safe spaces as well. Like, where am I safe and where am I going to be respected for who I am? And I find that now I'm a postgraduate, university is a good place for me. When I was an undergraduate, really not so much. And from people who were teaching disability studies or whatever you want to call it, you know, telling me how to use you know, person first language and stuff, and I was like, oh, whoa. Oh, we got some learning to do today. So I'm going to tell you all the ways in which that is wrong. So like, yeah, even when universities, when you have your little autism certificate or your ADHD certificate, like, people are still like, yeah, you know what, I read in a book once that these people want to be referred to as that. There's probably loads of us in this room. Why don't we just talk about it instead of like a non-disabled person telling me how to talk about my experiences all the time? It's so frustrating.
Yes, it is. Yeah, I was thinking, can we call it able-splaining? Is that a thing? So
I call it neurotypical splaining.
Well, yeah, but it's not always just that. Sometimes it's like physical, like disabilities as well. It's anyway, but I'm not going to go into that because I'm aware that we're already running a bit short of time. But I did want to say, like, something you said struck me, Rebecca, because I feel like the thing about it being social, like when I came out as trans, or when I realized I identified as trans, like, I changed my name and I changed my pronouns, and anyone that I wanted to talk to from like that I already knew, even if it was like, can I get a lift to whatever, or like, I'm coming home for Christmas or whatever, involved me coming out as trans to them. And we all know in the UK that is a very controversial thing to do. Even a lot of left-wing people may respond extremely badly to that. And so it was that feeling that with autism, all the other disability, like neurodivergent stuff, I can choose. But with that, just to be called the correct name, I have to bring up one of the most hot, controversial political topics in the UK and potentially be like subject to abuse. And I just, yes. So I'm now going to try and combine a whole bunch of questions in one because we're short on time and it's an ADHD mood. So the remaining questions, just for people that don't have this in front of them or have never seen this piece of paper / online box, is we've got some questions that are sort of around questioning norms and whether people feel that that's something that's more common for people who are neurodivergent to do, about the sense of invisibleness and how that contributes to things, about queer phobia and ableism, about specifically non-monogamy and asexuality or aromanticism and things like that, because those often aren't included in conversations like this, and in about how we choose which people we want to be around in long-term relationships or other types of relationships, and whether we specifically would seek people that are neurodivergent for whatever reason. I see some, I was going to try and bring them all together, but fortunately people have raised their hands, which is very good. So what I'm hoping is that if anyone had anything particularly like that they'd really like to say, and I personally would love to hear it, about those things, that they can just bring the part of it that they thought was best up just now in the next few minutes. So Alex, you first.
I'm always first, I felt a bit bad. I wanted to mention with the relationships, finding and maintaining relationships, that I've been in relationships with neurotypical people, and now being in a relationship with someone who's autistic. Yeah, I wouldn't want to be back in a relationship with a neurotypical person. The difference in the understanding and the respect with the most basic things of being like, I might be having a bad day and I'm really stimming and I can't really cope with that, and my partner understands what that means and understands how best, like, because we've spoken about this, and she will respect what I need and what I need her to do for me to calm down and go back to having a good time, or even just reacting positively and stimming and being non-vocal because I'm too happy, and them understanding what that means, and me not having to explain that me just wiggling my hands a lot means that I'm very happy. And that's something that I didn't have in relationships with neurotypical people. And yeah, that would probably be a big deal breaker now. Similarly, I don't think I'd be able to be in a relationship really with a straight person, because there's just so much that I feel like they wouldn't understand. It's like, there's so much difference, and like, cannot predict the future. Maybe it would happen, but like the thought of it is like, I feel like it'd be less good. And that might just be a bit of stereotyping and, you know, very like I'm making assumptions, but from experience is like, it's just a very different outlook in the world, and like just how you go in your day-to-day life, and not understanding the struggles with having to come out or just having to mask and all of these things. And it's like, there's a disconnect in such fundamental parts of who I am as a person. I don't see a way to, like, it would be like kind of being stuck in a relationship with someone who just didn't get it, wouldn't get you on a fundamental level. And again, making assumptions, but the assumptions come from somewhere, from experience, and just, yeah, I think would be quite difficult. And I have a bit of things to say on the other things, but I'm going to let other people speak because I think I'm speaking a bit much, and that was the one I wanted to say the most on.
I definitely don't think you're speaking too much, but I will let other people, I think it's nice to let other people answer first. So, and if we have time, we'll come back. So thank you very much for that. I think Artie, you were next.
I have a lot of things on the invisibility part. But also I just want to quickly throw in there, with no other context, that I want a commune and I'm working on one. So if that tells you anything about having a different kind of perception, a point of view on society and how it works, there you go. I'm still thinking through it, but yeah, the invisibility aspect of being, yeah, bi, non-binary, invisible chronic illnesses, ADHD, autism that wasn't ever picked up by anybody except myself, and the intersections of those things. It's too much to have in a character on TV or in a book. I don't ever see my entire self, and then obviously as well, I do have that privilege of being white, that other people who are not white but have all these intersecting identities too have that as well, as like a struggle for seeing themselves in media and representation of any kind. So I know that if I'm struggling, I know a lot of other people are struggling to see themselves, but also within each of our own communities, there's a lot of like the prejudices as well that intersect different things. I get a lot of cross cross-ableism, lateral ableism. Like I wrote an article on that because I've had some really awful things said to me by other disabled people about other disabilities I have. I've had very nasty comments from autistic people about my BPD. I've also had really awful things said about autism, ADHD by physically or chronically ill disabled people. And then the queer spaces are just generally quite ableist, full stop. And also then there's that layer of many of us will probably deal with substance. I'm not great on this particular topic with words, so I'm sorry if I say the wrong things. And also I've not been able to take my ADHD medication for a while, so I am also extra foggy. But like, I feel like in queer spaces generally, but I feel like especially with the overlap of neurodivergence, people who we're more likely to struggle with substance misuse, reliance, I don't know. And a lot of queer spaces are not built for that either. And even though that tends to be looked at as like a very separate issue from the combination of identities, I think that the more lived experiences you have on top of each other, the more likely it is that you will have these other kinds of struggles too. And there's never really anything like properly catered to you. So like I go to a Zoom support group for chronically ill people, and I've been misgendered a bunch of times, and they've only ever known me as ARTIE, they, them, and they tend to let a lot of ableism kind of slip through the cracks, and it just doesn't feel like a safe space as a trans person with multiple disabilities. So yeah, it tends to be like every space you think might be safe, turns out no, it's not safe. you kind of have to constantly cater who you are going to be everywhere. And like, I feel like this is probably something a lot of us will relate to, is that the more and more things we've realized and understood about ourselves when it comes to sexuality, gender, and disabilities, neurodivergence, the more we don't want to pretend to be somebody else, but also the more we realize we kind of don't have a lot of choice in a lot of situations, that there is always a way you have to filter yourself to fit a certain situation. I mean, I feel like that's been a lot of the conversation today as well, is that a lot of people feel like some situations you have to come out with a certain thing, and other situations it's, you know, like I think Elliot was saying, you know, being misgendered and the wrong names being used for you, or hate crime. And it's sad to be trying to work out those different aspects when all you want to be is yourself. But the world and the people who preach that they are for inclusion often are not telling the truth. And that's what I've tended to find in a lot of these circumstances where people preach, like, you know, disability rights. I'm like, okay, can I ask for some help? And they're like, you have to decide if you can do that, actually. I'm like, aren't you a disability advocate? And they're like, yeah, but you have to decide if you can do that. I'm like, okay, so we're not going to talk about the problem that I've brought forwards. A bunch of random shit there. Don't know what I said, actually, so I'll stop.
Liked it though. I thought it was good. I thought it all felt quite like, yeah.
It kind of just all goes, and it just goes.
Liked it.
So like,
yeah, people in the chat are saying they can relate to it as well. Me too. And I think it really relates to what we've all been, well, I say all, what people have said about the people that they choose to be around. I don't know if other people relate to this, but for me, I feel like I'm probably really quite defensive about a lot of aspects of my identity, and it's because it took me so long to believe that I was allowed to be the way I am, and it still feels like quite a fragile thing, and it's easy to fight for other people, but for myself, I still feel on some level like really I'm just being a bad boy, or even worse, a bad other gender. And, you know, so there's a lot of negative self-talk about that. But for me to be around someone who actually verbalizes that self-talk, especially if they were, you know, authority, power position type person, I just can't stand to hear it, because I've said it so many times to myself, and I fought so hard not to say it to myself anymore and to see myself for who I am, that's why, like kind of Alex said, I would rather not be around people who would rather that I wasn't myself. So, okay, Ellie, I think you're next.
Yeah, I wanted to say something about invisibility as well, and privilege, and then something about the norms.
Great.
When it comes to invisible identities, I feel like there's pros and cons to being visible. And I feel like in my specific case, at least, it's a privilege being able to choose whether to come out or not, because you know, I can decide whether I want to fake to be neurotypical for a while, and it doesn't impose too many constraints. I mean, of course, it depends on the situation, but most of the time I can. And of course, I can definitely decide not to be bi, because you know, I'm living with a man, so it's perfect from the kind of perspective. And so what I felt like, at least in these last year or something, since I have a small platform on Instagram, I have 9,000 followers now, is that I kind of felt not obliged, but at least like forced to use my privilege, so that people are reminded that people who do not look like the stereotypical autistic or queer person can be autistic and queer. And so even though, I mean, invisibility was and is a privilege in a sense, but at the same time is the possibility not to be seen and to be obliged to make your identity political, even when you might not want it to be, in a way. So sometimes I do come out without actually wanting people around me to know me better, but just to educate them. And that feels very weird to me. So this was the first part. The second part about the norms is also awkward to me, because maybe it's because I'm a little bit late to the party, because I came out with myself at the age of 28 and I'm 29 now. But I feel like the fact is my autistic brain tends to stick to explicit rules quite a lot. At the same time, it struggles to grasp implicit rules. So I do feel like we challenge the norms more than neurotypical people would do. But at the same time, I'm not really sure this is because we challenge the norms because we want to. Actually, when we know the norms, we tend to stick to them. So it's more like I struggle to grasp some of these norms, and so I do not feel logical to follow them. I mean, it's not logic to me, so I'm not doing it. But whenever I know about some explicit rules, I do stick to them. So for instance, when it comes to monogamy, which I feel like is less discussed also in queer spaces, I felt enormous amounts of guilt for not following the rules, although I do feel like I challenge some norms. So I'm not 100% sure there's an answer to this challenging the norms because you're neurodivergent kind of issue. To me, it's very ambiguous. That was it. I have no answers really, just questions.
Yeah, I think that's the nature of it, isn't it? Yes. I think for the norms thing, for me, I feel like if it becomes clear that a big aspect of society's norms don't really suit me, it makes me feel more able to be like, maybe there are other things that don't suit me. Maybe all of this is socially constructed. I mean, it's taken decades, but I think that's, you know, when there's something that's so clear, well, like, you know, it's meant to be normal that I'm like this and I'm definitely not like that. So, but there's a lot, I think, that nobody really knows about assumptions that people make and implicit rules and how those are understood differently by different neurotypes and things. So hopefully there will be work looking into that. I think Jay next.
Yeah, again, just sort of jumping on the invisibility question, kind of combined with the spaces, so queerphobia and the neurodivergent community, etc. So yeah, I think I've got a significant amount of internalized ableism that I sort of somehow managed to write into myself and my identity, in addition to like that which has sort of been imposed on me by other people. And it sort of meant for me that I wasn't able to fully embrace my own invisible identities until I was sort of ready to make them visible by coming out. So again, going back to what we discussed before, and having to accept that I was different, and actually I needed support in certain areas and certain spaces. And I think for me, I had to wait to make them visible. I think, yeah, like I really did struggle. I struggled with sort of having these invisible identities that were such a massive part of me, that again, I sort of was masking it sort of in every which way, which really takes its toll. And I think like when you don't have the vocabulary or the space in which to express what you're experiencing, it's very sort of easy to fall back into a place of sort of darkness and silence and denial. And I was sort of undoing all of the work that I'd done to construct my own identity and sort of like peel back the layers, I guess. And that's when I realized that actually the intersection for me of like my queerness and again, like my neurodivergent identity, it's just such a massive part of who I am. Like I wouldn't be me without either of them. So the fact that I was sort of being very internally ableist and sort of saying like, no, like you can't be autistic, you can't be ADHD. Okay, you are officially, but yeah, let's just hide that. Let's just be like this person because this person's successful and that person's not. And yeah, it's been a long journey of sort of peeling back those layers and making myself visible. And I'm sort of very open about my invisible identities. I don't try and keep them invisible and I don't try and hide them. Again, that's a privilege. I can come out in spaces and I can introduce myself as me in every way. But I think like until I understood that I wasn't neuronormative in any way, for example, like there wasn't any chance that I would ever be able to sort of be fully happy in my own existence. And I think that's also why I've been sort of part of the creation of a specific queer and neurodivergent safe space for that intersection. Again, like I've been in both ableist queer spaces and queer phobic neurodivergent spaces. So I sort of had experiences on both sides really. And I found that the queer phobia that I experienced actually affected how I felt about my own neurodivergence, and the ableism that I experienced actually affected how I felt about my own queerness. So again, sort of the whole, like both identities are just so linked. And again, these are physical spaces and online spaces. We all know like what social media can be like. And for many people, that's sort of the point of departure. That's sort of where people suddenly realize, oh, actually, maybe I am queer, or oh, I really relate to what this person's tweeting about being autistic or about being ADHD. So I think, again, these spaces, it's hard to say, but like sometimes you have to learn the hard way and have to have those experiences to realize, because I was throwing myself into all these spaces thinking, yes, this is great, I can be with all the queer people, and not realizing that actually in being in that space, I was actually like harming my own neurodivergent identity, I guess. So I sort of had to learn the hard way. But yeah, like for me, I like being invisible sometimes because I don't like being visible for the wrong reasons, if that makes sense. I like being visible because people respect me and people like love me for who I am, and because people are so open and they just want to, like, they'll ask questions, but it's because they want to learn more, and they're from a genuine place of ignorance, not a place of harm, or, you know, they're just generally interested in what can I do to help, like how can I refer to you, or what pronouns, or whatever, all of these questions. Oh, and why do you use pronouns? It's like, okay, I love the fact that you're asking me, this is amazing, like thank you, because most people just don't ask, they just sort of go, oh yeah, whatever, brush it off, next kind of experience. But yeah, I don't like being visible because it's an issue, and I think that especially queer people are visible for the wrong reasons. Visible, especially things like transgender visibility, for example, like we're visible for the like temporarily, and then again we go back to being visible for the wrong reasons again. And I think I have the privilege to be able to kind of pick and choose. I can go and not be a visibly trans person, and I completely misgender myself, and I can use my dead name, and I can, you know, whatever, if I have to for my own safety, I can do that. And I know that that is not something everyone can do. I can mask and I can be as neurotypical as you need me to be, pretty much like just click and I'll do it sort of thing. And it's incredibly harmful for myself, but it keeps me safe in certain situations. And that's what I find really hard in my own sort of the balance, I guess, between visibility and invisibility. At what point can I stop being invisible and be safe, if that makes sense? Probably doesn't, but that's sort of where I am at the moment, in terms of like, my queerness and my neurodivergent identities. Finding a balance and being who I am, but staying safe.
I mean, it makes perfect sense. That's the hard part, I think, because you say, you know, you have a choice. And I mean, absolutely you do. But I feel a similar choice between being who people want me to be and damaging myself, or being who I am, but it being a constant fight and feeling like I should be ashamed for doing that. When in fact, I think that the thing, like, yeah, I feel like, of course, being yourself and fighting for that is something people shouldn't be ashamed for at all. So it's just that choice, because they both feel like the abyss, don't they? And one is almost like, for me, being who the other person wants to be to me is an act of, it's a trauma response for me. It's appeasing, it's being safe, it is my default when I don't feel safe, but it is probably the most harmful thing I can do to myself. Yeah. Whereas the other thing feels to me like I'm being self-indulgent and difficult and all of these things, and it's probably how I'm perceived by others as well. And part of me believes that on some level that I shouldn't be doing that. You know, there's a voice in my head that doesn't believe that. But of course, that's probably the thing that if I really think about it, I should be doing. But the constant fight to be accepted, plus the constant fight, like, I mean, we haven't started on, and I think probably today is not the day for it, but on how difficult it is to get diagnoses for a lot of the conditions that we have, and the fight that involves, and speaking up to authority that involves, and telling doctors that in fact they are incorrect that involves. So that invisibility, it's almost like, it's like the one ring, I suppose. Like, yeah, sure, you can be invisible, but the ring wraiths are going to come and get you. So like, then what? You know, like, and by the ring wraiths, I sort of mean, just to use a Lord of the Ring reference to make that explicit, like, it's my own self-doubt and my own harming of myself. So I can really relate to what you're saying there. I hope I didn't project too much on your experience though.
No, not at all. It's always nice to hear that although they're bad experiences, somebody else shares them. I think having somebody say me too, or like, yeah, I totally relate to that, it just sort of chips away at that sort of I'm the only person in this world with this experience and I don't know what to do about it. It kind of, yeah, it breaks down that barrier a little bit more. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, you too. Katie.
Yeah, I think I've got two things to say. I think with the invisible disabilities or invisible queerness, like, I just don't think it exists. Like, I if you can't tell that I'm queer or that I'm autistic or ADHD and all these other things, that ain't on me, honey, that's on you. Because I can notice a neurodivergent person from, like, you know, 2 fields away. Like, I know who you are. I know who's coming towards me. Do you know what I mean? We've got that. So I think this, and that's not, you know, what people have said here today is absolutely valid. But I think it's not us who's making it invisible. It's other people who, it didn't matter how well we act or behave or fit into these little boxes that people like to make. They, you know, they're gonna kind of ignore us anyways. Like, and that's the importance of spaces like this today, is that, you know, we're not invisible. Don't make us invisible. Like, I'm very clearly not the same as most other people. Like, I don't know how I have to make this more obvious to you. Like, I haven't got my, like, autism wizard hat on today, sorry, but, like, you know, so I feel like the invisibleness is more to do with other people than it is to do with us. Well, for me anyways, it's perhaps very personal to me. You know, like, I can tell so there's a person I work with who has rheumatoid arthritis, and I know that he is in constant pain. Like, I know that, but I can tell when he's dipping. But I will be the only person in our office who'll go, are you okay today? And he'll say, you know, explain what's going on with him. And I'm just like, I work at a disability charity. Like, there's a lot of us who are disabled and neurodivergent in our office. Like, I think people are choosing not to see things. So that's my big thing about invisibility. Like, I don't think that I have ever made a convincing straight cis person. I'm not convinced that it was never something I was set out to do, but I'm not convinced that anyone was ever going, oh yes, yeah, they're definitely, oh yeah, definitely straight. And yeah. And I think the same with, like, my neurology and stuff. Like, I just don't think anyone's buying it. And I'm not selling it, frankly. Like, I don't care. Like, if you, like Alex was saying earlier, if you don't like it, then just buy. Like, I don't have time for this. Like, life is too exhausting being multiply neurodivergent as it is, without having to put up with everyone else's bullshit. I just don't have time for it. I don't have the energy for it. And my second thing, which is actually really related to that, is, like, when we were talking about norms and stuff, if norms are created by society and by a group of people who don't share a lot of our body minds, like, if we have completely different body minds and physiology to other people, like, their rules don't mean anything to me. Your rules don't mean anything to me because they're based on norms that I can't even begin to understand and actually don't give a shit about. It's not about the fact that I can't understand and I don't want to understand. I don't care. I'm not interested. You know, if you want to be polyamorous, yeah, absolutely, love it. Why not? If you want to live by yourself with 5 cats, do it. What, you know, people don't have to live in a kind of nuclear family and this idea of kind of toxic heteronormativity and neurotypicalism and being able-bodied and stuff like that. I don't buy into any of that. I just think all these boxes just need to be yeeted into the sea because they're just not useful to us.
Yeah, you know, I say this too, like in some cases, yes, it's that I don't know what the norm is, but in a lot of cases I do, and I think, or like what the rule is, I think it's bullshit. Like the reason that I don't know what it is in the first place is because it's a weirdly constructed rule that makes no sense. Like, that's why we didn't see it, because it was weird and some people decided that that was a good way to try and control others. But, like, your mind power does not work here. Like, I don't know. But and then once I realized why the rule, like, I'm like, okay, that sounds like a rule. Great. Why is it a rule? And they're like, well, that's what's appropriate, or that's what's professional. And I'm like, oh, I see, it's a shaming one. Great. Thanks for that. And like, then, like, I guess, to be fair, I've been in therapy for 5 or 6 years continuously, which is about exploring the rules I live life by, and whether or not like I want to do that, and being able to make choices that feel right for me. And a big part of that is being able to be like, oh, I see that is your rule. That's nice for you. By that, what I don't mean is that I think that I should be able to do whatever the hell I like without any consequences and without having to think about how that impacts on other people. I think that when it comes down to all of this stuff, rules are at best a guess for how things will impact on people before it is actually known how that individual person will feel about it. So like a rule might be, don't swear. But if you ask people and they're like, oh no, I'm fine with that, then that supersedes the rule. Like that's on top of the, so that was very relatable. We have got a question that's come up. Sorry, there's things in the chat that have just come up and I'm laughing. It is done this way because that is how it's done. Yeah, no, right? Like how, like, I don't understand why that seems like an acceptable answer for people. Like, yeah, my least favorite, we've always done it this way. Tradition is just peer pressure from dead people. Oh my God, you guys, I love it. Guys and people that do not identify as guys, folks in general. So there's a question that's come up from someone that I like very much and work with when I get the chance, and I think has had to leave now, but she wondered if we would mind answering the question so that she can watch it on the recording when it comes back. Anyone that's still here and needs to leave, please, that's fine, you're allowed to. I won't be upset in the slightest, but we'll keep going for another 5-ish minutes just to answer this question, if people are all right with that. That goes to the panel too. If you need to disappear, no excuses are needed. You're very much allowed to do that. So Jane would like to know, what is the most important thing, I know there's not going to be just one thing, it's okay, that colleagues, managers, supervisors, etc. can do to make people who are LGBTQ+ and neurodivergent feel safe, comfortable and respected? What does a safe space in the workplace or study environment look like? So basically, if you could just solve my job for me just now in the next 5 minutes, then I'll write that down and then great. That was sarcasm kind of, but I would love to hear what people have to say. So Artie, tell me the things.
First, we must dismantle the entire existence of society and capitalism.
So that's the one thing, like get rid of yeah,
that's the
and maybe
thing.
The patriarchy while we're at it.
Yeah, the one thing is scrap it and start again.
Okay.
That's all I have. I'm really sorry, but like that's kind of the basis of all of my arguments, is everything must be scrapped and started again, because I feel like there is no real improving upon what we have got going on, to be honest. I have a lot of problems trying to access work, access healthcare, access social situations. It just needs to be gone and start again with a different focus.
The focus is?
Giving a shit about people. I'm sorry, is it that, like?
Yeah, no, that's legit. Yeah.
Why don't we fucking care about anyone?
I literally don't know. It's confusing.
That's all I have. I'm really sorry. I can't be more specific.
No, I think that's, I mean, that's quite specific. It's just quite a big thing, but we can get started on it, right? Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I think Jay was next.
Yeah, Artie, I was sort of thinking, like, do I just put my hand down now? I think, like, it's all been said.
Say it again, man.
Yeah, no, honestly, no, like, I think, honestly, like, just listen to us and just empathize and speak from a place of respect and never act on what you think would be right for someone else. Like, if you're not basing any kind of adaptation or what you consider to be a safe space on the actual true needs of a person who will use that space or who will benefit from those adaptations and accommodations, whether it's for work or study or whatever, then there's just no point. Again, like what Artie said, just scrap it. I'm very fed up of having to sort of prove my disability with a piece of paper that is in no way a reflection of me as a person. It's just a load of medical jargon that just has to like fit certain boxes and tick certain things. And there's just no like humanity in any of the processes that are implemented in order to make these changes or to make a safe space. And I think the whole like nothing about us without us kind of thing like just goes without saying, that unless, you know, if you're making a new space for neurodivergent people, for example, if it's going to be a safe space, don't even bother doing it unless you're going to consult neurodivergent people. If, you know, the same with queer people, if you're making a queer space, like it's just not going to be successful and it's going to be harmful unless it's made by queer people. And I just think, yeah, for me, that's always a barrier that I just end up just hitting constantly, is that it's kind of like unsolicited advice from people who've never lived these experiences, just kind of just like dominating everything and telling you what's right for you. And it's like, no, I will tell you what's right for me. And I think the problem we have is that, especially when it's to do with like healthcare or access to work or access to study, once it's done, it's done. And these are things that it's very difficult to change working upwards. I think it's like a constant fight and a constant battle. And more often than not, these safe spaces are not set up by the people who are going to use them. Access to work isn't set up by people who have ever struggled to access work. Again, privilege. Yeah, we could talk about this for hours, but yeah, just listen to us and work with us as opposed to speaking for us and essentially thinking you're doing the right thing, but you're actually pushing us further away from being able to access what it is that we're trying to access. So yeah, that's me.
It's that paternalistic thing, isn't it? Like I had an experience recently, I've had a few experiences recently actually, but where it was felt that essentially, I just think people think that doctors have the answers and that only doctors can speak to somebody's experience of being disabled. And I mean this in exactly the way that it sounds, but I know more than most doctors in the country about most of my disabilities because they are so under-researched and so little is known about them. And I've read the papers and I have experienced it as a person. I'm not saying that people need to have academic experience to be able to be expert of their lived experience, but that pervasive thing of, oh, well, it's only this if a doctor has said it. And I'm like, the doctor could say it, but they know nothing about it. Like, it's that, oh, well, we need to reinforce that existing power hierarchy and therefore increase the existing inequalities, which the diagnostic process already does. Like, great. Like, I'm very lucky in that I am white and upper middle class, and so doctors often take me seriously in ways that they wouldn't otherwise. But I am also trans and have a body that experiences things that the medical profession has generally not looked into greatly. So yeah, sorry, it's just my personal current bugbear is the fact that we rely on a system that just reinforces and widens existing inequalities to make people have any chance of starting to get any support. It's just upsetting. I will move on. If anyone's talking too much today, it's definitely me. Ella, you're next.
Yeah, I was just thinking more generally that the problem with most workplaces is that it's usually built from the top down rather than from the bottom up. Because when we talk about, like, for instance, having disabled people or queer people deciding the way that workplace should work, sometimes I feel like we're kind of generalizing the individual experience of queerness and disability. So we're again building a workplace from the top down. So I'd rather kind of see it the other way around. So from the bottom, meaning the people actually involved in that specific workplace, up. So because even for autistic people, like if you think about autism and ADHD, for instance, they work in completely different ways. And well, of course, there's overlapping, but like even inside the autism spectrum, we're all different. So once I go into, I don't know, my specific office and say, like, autistic people work this way, so we'll do things this way from now on. And then another autistic person comes and that doesn't work for them. So rather than all of these D and I and whatever it's called, the diversity and inclusion stuff, even if they do have people from these communities involved, it can still be a problem whenever like any new norm is enforced on people who do not work the same exact way of the person who they consulted with. So it's rather to dismantle this top-down rather than bottom-up way of deciding what's the right way to work. And another thing that I think about a lot is that caring about people doesn't seem to be productive. Well, it's completely, I mean, it's the other way around, because if you make a person work the way they're most comfortable working, they're probably gonna be more productive. I know this is capitalism as well, but still, you know, it can be used to that extent to make our life easier. So I really want managers and supervisors to know that this is not about accommodating people who do not want to work. It's about making these people more productive most of the times. It's not like they have to be more productive, but they probably could be if they were allowed to. So that's what I think about this.
Yes, I mean, I feel like it's all so true. And it's just shorthand for like, believe people. If somebody says that this would be helpful for them, like, if you can do it and it's not going to like really screw things up, then why not just do it? Like, what's the harm? It's like we had Jackie Stabler a few weeks ago talking about her experience as a amazing, she didn't say that, but clearly business owner as an autistic person. And she was like, oh yeah, well, if I have employees and there's something that would help them, then they ask, and if I can do it and it's like, and it's going to be okay, then I do it. And people were just like, huh. So yes, again, it's about there not being a power structure saying, oh, well, these are the ways you're allowed to be, or these are the approved ways of being disabled, or, well, I've spoken to an autistic person and apparently you all, and there, yeah, agreed. I think we all know I could talk about this for years. I think Katie was next, and then Rebecca.
Oh, hello, what have I done? Oh,
I don't know.
Oh, my screen looks different. Yeah, I think if it's specifically about workplaces, like something that usually helps one specific person is usually quite good to help quite a lot of people. So like my husband and I were talking about this the other day, because he's been a teacher for a long time now. And if he finds that he's a maths teacher, so if he finds if there's something that helps one child in his class, child with Down syndrome, autistic child, whoever, like actually usually that's quite a good option for quite a lot of people in that class. And I think giving people options, and clear, informed options as well. Not like, why do I always have to ask for accommodations? Why do I have to always advocate for myself? Like, the things I'm carrying around with me are already exhausting, already very difficult. Like, I can't work full time. Like, so why would I, my workplace is very good, I will just say, but like, why do people have to go into their places of work and always have to struggle with things and always have to say, well, this isn't very good. Like, this isn't very good. Like, when actually it would benefit probably most of the people in the office or in the wherever it is you work. Like, just make things easier for everyone. Like, I don't think it necessarily has to be like, it's definitely a disability issue, and it's definitely a neurodivergence issue and a queer and everything else issue, but like, it's a people issue. Like, if you want people to be happy, whether that's they're happy because you like them to be happy, or happy because they make you more money when they're happy and they're more productive, like, it's really easy to make other people happy. Like, and I'm not supposed to be a person who knows how to do that because of like my autistic brain. Like, if I can see how to do it, I don't understand how other people can't get there. And I think from what ELEONORA was saying about it might have been Jay actually, but someone was saying about being listened to. I think there's also like an element of being believed as well. Like, so I was on a project recently, I won't name any names, but like I mean, some people here work at a university, so like, you know what university admin can be like. It's a nightmare. And I was on a project, and I had to do like a certain amount of admin for like timesheets and expenses and stuff like that. And the goalpost of that would change every time, and the person that you're supposed to talk to would change every time. And every time I'd be getting it wrong, and they'd be sending it to me, and it all became a thing. I just want to hand in a timesheet. So I'd say to the person who was involved in the project, I really can't deal with this system of stuff. Like, this is really stressing me out. Like, this is the point where I'm going to walk off the project or have a meltdown, and the meltdowns aren't good for me. And I said that 2 or 3 times. And you know what happened? I left the project. And you know what the project was about? It was about helping autistic people get into higher education. So like, the irony here is like beyond. So don't like argue with me. Like, I understand that I'm doing a degree, darling. Yes, that's why I'm here. And I understand that I can, you know, use rudimentary tools and ride a bicycle. But like, I need help with admin stuff, and it's not shameful for me to need help with that. I'm 31 years old, and you know what? I'm not very good at using a computer. Sue me for it. Just help me with it. It's not difficult. Like, so I think it's also like listening to people, giving people a space to be listened to anyways, taking them for real, not arguing about whether we should be feeling or doing things a certain way, and then just getting on and doing it, because it's going to benefit everyone.
Yeah, but don't you love, and I'm about to be sarcastic. I agree. That's not sarcastic. Like, don't you love it? Because they either goes, well, it's not going to help anyone else, or even better, they say, yes, but then everyone would want that. And you're like, well, okay, then.
Well, then roll it out, honey. Like, yes.
I don't know. It's just like people feel like their job is the big gatekeeper of human happiness, and to be productive and acceptable at work, you must be sad. Like, it's like they think that you'd be getting away with something. Somebody once referred to my reasonable adjustments as a little bit extra, and I wrote a poem about it, which is available for free, by the way, on a ableism and academia book. But yes, that wasn't intended as I'm not trying to be that person. Yeah, completely agree with all of that. And Rebecca's been waiting so patiently, and I don't know if you're anything like me, but I have absolutely zero patience, so you deserve some sort of medal. So off you go, Rebecca.
I think I maybe took the questions as a slightly less broad thing, but like, I was thinking about like, what would I want my like supervisor to do, or like people I work with? And I think that there's a word for what I'm about to describe that I can't remember, but like making the conversations like acceptable and like not something to be hidden. And so like, I want to be able to be like, these are the things that will help me succeed, and not sort of have to couch it in some like thing where I'm pretending not to be neurodivergent or whatever. And as part of that, I think is also like, believe me as the person who knows the most about what will help me, but also like go and do some of your own work and like have a Google, because like I want to do the like the top of the explaining, but you can do the bottom of the learning yourself. And by like putting in that work, it makes the space feel a lot safer, or like more welcoming, I think.
Yeah, agreed. And it's good to have some actual specific things that people can think about implementing as well, because the challenge with all of this is there's so much structural inequality that it can feel overwhelming. And of course, what really needs to happen is that individual people don't have to like, who are already marginalized, often have the responsibility for putting things into place when it's a much bigger structural issue. However, how we treat people has such a big impact. So I think that really makes sense. So I'm going to bring things to a close, but I just wanted to say how personally, I don't know, fulfilling, validating, exciting, great I have found hearing all of your experiences today and talking to you. It's been amazing, and I'm so grateful, because it's been lovely for me, and I think it's something that other people like I want everyone to know, I want people to be able to see. So it's so nice. I feel like I got too excited and now I don't know how to finish things off in a way that approximates like neurotypicality. So maybe I won't.
We're all best friends now. So
we're all best friends now. That's fine. Great, fantastic. So what I'll say is, for those of you on the panel, thank you so much. For those of you that have come along to watch, thank you so much. If any of those people would like to ask any questions, if you want to get in touch, if you have a question or something, like if you were in the audience and you have a question for someone on the panel, then feel free to email me and or Chiara, and we can ask said panel member if they would be comfortable being in touch with you or sharing their information. And if anyone wants to discuss other opportunities or ideas for things that we can do in the future as Neurodiversity Network at the University of Glasgow, then please also get in touch.
Yeah,
and I think that's all.
Actually, thank you too. Thank you so much for everybody for volunteering your time and your experiences on a topic that can be difficult to talk about and loaded for a lot of us. So thank you very much for your generosity in doing this and your openness. If there's anything that we can do to share publicly, any of the things and the work that you're doing, I will get in touch with you and we'll share that alongside the recording as well, so other people can benefit from your wisdom and knowledge. So thank you to Elliot for chairing as well. And yeah, time for lunch, I think.
Cool. And thank you to Chiara for initiating this particular one.